Billionaire left divorce, papers on the table, and gave his pregnant wife 48 hours to leave for his new girlfriend. But he and his mistress didn't know their worst nightmare was just beginning. My beautiful family, this is a great story of a very powerful wife. Please don't skip the video. A short prayer for everyone. May God bless you and give you whatever your heart desires. Don't forget to press the like button and drop a comment. I am with my brother. Let's begin the story. When queens are betrayed, they don't weep, they sharpen their crowns. The divorce papers lay scattered across the Carrara marble countertop like fallen leaves, their crisp white edges catching the morning light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Park Avenue penthouse. Amanda Johnson stood motionless for exactly 3 seconds, her dark brown eyes scanning the legal documents with the precision of a sniper acquiring a target. At 36, Amanda possessed the kind of commanding presence that had made grown men stutter during Goldman Sachs board meetings. Her rich mahogany skin seemed to glow against the stark white kitchen, and her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo that spoke of both sophistication and strength. The Harvard MBA hanging in her home office had opened doors, but her brilliant strategic mind had demolished walls entirely. 3 months pregnant and feeling invincible rather than vulnerable, Amanda picked up the papers Michael had so carelessly abandoned beside her morning espresso. She read each clause with the methodical attention she once gave to billion-dollar merger documents, her lips curving into a smile that would have terrified her former corporate adversaries. Then she laughed. It started as a low chuckle deep in her throat, then expanded into rich, full-bodied laughter that echoed through the $15 million penthouse like thunder. This wasn't the bitter laugh of a broken woman or the hysterical sob of someone in denial. This was the laughter of a chess grandmaster who had just realized her opponent had walked directly into checkmate. 48 hours, she said to the empty kitchen, her voice carrying the authority that had once silenced hostile boardrooms. You actually think 48 hours is enough to erase a queen? The click of stiletto heels against marble announced an unwelcome intrusion. Jessica Miller emerged from the master bedroom wearing Amanda's La Perla silk robe, her bottle-blonde hair deliberately tousled in what she probably considered seductive. At 27, Jessica embodied the kind of manufactured beauty that attracted weak men, artificially enhanced features, strategically applied makeup, and the hollow confidence of someone who had never faced genuine adversity. "Good morning, Amanda," Jessica purred, clearly anticipating tears or rage. Her voice carried the saccharine sweetness of artificial sugar. "I hope there won't be any unpleasantness about this." Amanda turned with predatory grace, her movements fluid and controlled. The morning sickness that had plagued her for weeks seemed to have evaporated, replaced by crystal-clear focus that sharpened every sense. "Unpleasantness," she repeated, setting the papers down with deliberate precision. "Darling, you've just handed me the greatest gift of my professional career." Michael Davis appeared in the doorway, his face already showing the stress lines that success had failed to erase. At 40, he retained the soft features that had once attracted Amanda, but 7 years of marriage had revealed his true character, entitled, insecure, and ultimately forgettable. His tech company existed because of his father's connections and Amanda's strategic guidance, though he'd conveniently forgotten both facts. "Amanda, I know this seems sudden," Michael began, his voice carrying that condescending tone she'd learned to despise. "But we both understand this marriage reached its expiration date. Jessica and I have been discussing—" "Have you now?" Amanda interrupted, walking to the kitchen island with the fluid confidence of a panther stalking prey. "And what fascinating conversations those must have been. Did you share the Peterson account details? The Morrison merger strategies? Or perhaps you discussed my private medical information with your little protégé here?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Michael's face went pale, and Jessica took an involuntary step backward. Amanda retrieved her phone from the marble counter, scrolling through her contacts with practiced ease. "I've been wondering when you'd finally develop enough spine for this conversation, Michael. 4 months of suspicious behavior, unexplained absences, and pathetically obvious lies. Did you really believe I wouldn't prepare for this moment?" She pressed a contact number, never taking her eyes off Michael's increasingly panicked expression. "Jennifer." "Amanda Johnson. Yes, we're implementing the full protocol immediately. Davis Technologies audit the Peterson investigation and run that background check on Jessica Miller we discussed." She paused, watching Jessica's manufactured confidence crumble in real time. "Perfect. I'll expect the preliminary findings within the hour." "What are you doing?" Michael's voice cracked slightly, the entitled bravado beginning to fracture. Amanda ended the call and smiled, the same smile that had once convinced Fortune 500 CEOs to liquidate entire divisions based on her recommendations. "I'm doing what I've always done, Michael. I'm thinking 3 moves ahead while you're still trying to understand the rules of the game." She opened her laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard with surgical precision. The screen filled with documents, financial records, and email chains that made Michael step backward involuntarily. Years of meticulous documentation that painted a detailed picture of fraud, tax evasion, and systematic investor manipulation. "You see, while you were planning your midlife crisis with Miss Miller here, I was preparing for every possible contingency." Amanda's tone remained conversational, professional. "Jennifer Matthews is Manhattan's most feared divorce attorney. She's also my former Harvard roommate and the woman who secured that 9-figure settlement in the Morrison case last year. You remember that case, don't you? 3 executives facing federal charges, complete asset forfeiture, and permanent industry blacklisting." Jessica grabbed Michael's arm, her earlier smugness replaced by genuine terror. "Michael, what is she talking about?" "She's talking about the systematic destruction of everything you think you've stolen," Amanda replied before Michael could speak. She turned the laptop screen toward them, displaying financial records that made Michael's breathing become shallow and rapid. Bank records showing diverted funds, email chains discussing investor fraud, recorded phone conversations where you admit to securities violations, and my personal favorite, the Peterson account documents that prove you've been using insider information for stock manipulation. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, Manhattan pulsed with morning energy, but inside the penthouse, time seemed suspended. "The prenup," Michael began weakly, "becomes void in cases of criminal fraud," Amanda finished, closing the laptop with a soft click. "But this isn't about money, Michael. This is about respect. This is about ensuring that my daughter grows up understanding that her mother is not a woman who gets discarded quietly." Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, where new life grew. A child who would be raised by a warrior, not a victim. Amanda walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silhouette framed against the Manhattan skyline she had helped shape through years of strategic consulting. The city belonged to people like her, people who planned, who anticipated, who understood that true power wasn't inherited or given, but earned through intelligence and preparation. "Here's what happens next," she said, turning back to face them with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful men. "You've graciously given me 48 hours to vacate these premises. I'm going to use every single one of those hours to dismantle the illusion that you matter in this city." Michael's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You can't do this." "I'm not doing anything, Michael. I'm simply sharing information that should have been disclosed years ago." Amanda gathered the divorce papers, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Your investors deserve to know about the Peterson fraud. The Securities and Exchange Commission deserves those recorded conversations. And Miss Miller's current employer deserves to understand exactly what kind of person they've hired for their corporate communications team." Jessica's face had gone white. "You recorded us." "I recorded everything," Amanda said simply. Every phone call, every meeting, every conversation where either of you discussed my marriage, my pregnancy, or my business relationships. New York is a one-party consent state, which makes all of those recordings completely legal and admissible in both civil and criminal proceedings. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. Where Michael had expected to find a broken woman begging for mercy, he had discovered a chess grandmaster who had been orchestrating this endgame for months. Jessica looked between them, finally understanding that she hadn't stolen a prize. She had inherited a catastrophe. Amanda walked toward her home office, her heels clicking against the marble with the rhythm of a countdown timer. "I'll be out of here by Friday evening, exactly as requested." "But Michael," she paused in the doorway, her smile containing enough ice to freeze the Hudson River. "When you wake up Monday morning, you're going to discover that underestimating me was the most expensive mistake of your pathetic life." Behind her, she could hear Jessica's panicked whispers and Michael's stammered attempts at damage control. But Amanda Johnson was already planning 3 moves ahead, visualizing the empire that would rise from the ashes of their betrayal. 48 hours to pack, Michael. I only need 48 minutes to end you. Chapter 2. The Royal Departure. A queen never flees. She makes her exit a coronation. Friday. Evening arrived with the precision of Amanda's strategic planning. The Park Avenue penthouse hummed with carefully orchestrated activity as Manhattan's most exclusive relocation service, the same company that had discreetly moved 2 Supreme Court justices and the Secretary of Treasury, executed Amanda's departure. With military efficiency, she stood in her walk-in closet, a space larger than most Manhattan studio apartments, selecting items with the calculated precision of a general choosing weapons for battle. Every piece represented power. The midnight black Armani suits that had intimidated opposing counsel in federal court, the crimson Louboutin heels that had clicked across marble floors during presentations that moved billions, the vintage Chanel collection that had graced charity galas where she'd cultivated relationships with the city's most influential power brokers. "Mrs. Johnson, your transportation has arrived," announced Maria Santos, the housekeeper who had served the Davis household for 9 years. Her voice carried profound respect that Michael had never earned, and her dark eyes held the admiration reserved for those who recognize authentic strength. Maria had witnessed Amanda's transformation over 48 hours, from betrayed wife to strategic predator, and understood she was observing history. Amanda nodded gracefully, fastening pearl earrings that had been a gift to herself after securing her first $10 million consulting contract. The lustrous orbs caught the chandelier light, casting subtle reflections across the mirror that revealed a woman completely transformed by purpose. Gone was any trace of the wife who had discovered infidelity 2 days prior. In her place stood a corporate warrior preparing for total conquest. The rhythmic sound of designer luggage wheels against Italian marble echoed through the penthouse as Amanda's meticulously curated possessions were transported toward their new destination. She had selected nothing sentimental, nothing that acknowledged the life she was abandoning. Instead, she had chosen symbols of the empire she was building: her collection of international business awards, her Harvard diplomas, her library of first-edition strategy texts, and most importantly, the extensive documentation files that contained the ammunition for Michael's destruction. Jessica appeared in the master bedroom doorway, draped in one of Amanda's $5,000 silk robes. The irony was exquisite. The girl was literally wearing the spoils of a war she had already lost without realizing it. "I want you to understand that I hold no animosity toward you personally," Jessica declared, her voice artificially sweetened with false magnanimity. "Michael explained that your marriage had been emotionally dead for years." Amanda paused in her packing, turning to study Jessica with the detached fascination of a scientist examining an interesting but ultimately irrelevant specimen. Animosity, she repeated, the word rolling off her tongue like she was tasting something foreign and distasteful. My dear child, animosity requires acknowledgement of equal status. You're simply collateral damage in a much larger strategic operation. She returned to folding a platinum-grey blazer that had been tailored specifically for her by a designer who clothed European royalty. Tell me, Jessica, what exactly did Michael promise you? The penthouse, the Hampton estate, perhaps a prominent position in his company. Amanda's smile was arctic in its beauty, because in approximately 72 hours, none of those assets will exist in any form you'd recognize. The color drained from Jessica's artificially enhanced features as the implications penetrated her comprehension. She had assumed Amanda's departure represented surrender, not the opening movement of total warfare. Michael emerged from his home office, his face haggard from 2 sleepless nights spent frantically attempting damage control. His fingers were stained with ink from signing emergency documents, and his usually pristine appearance had deteriorated into something approaching desperation. The Hamptons' property, he said without preamble, his voice hoarse from hours of phone negotiations. Your name isn't on the deed. The yacht, the art collection, the wine cellar, you have no legal claim to any of it. Amanda continued packing with unhurried precision, folding each garment as if she had unlimited time rather than 30 minutes remaining before her departure deadline. Legal claims are fascinating constructs, Michael. They depend entirely on the legitimacy of the ownership structure. She placed a hand-beaded evening gown into tissue paper with reverent care. What happens to property acquisitions when the underlying income is proven fraudulent? When tax evasion is documented? When federal prosecutors begin asset seizure proceedings? The question hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Michael's breathing became shallow as he processed the implications of his crumbling empire. You're bluffing, he whispered, but his voice carried no conviction. Am I? Amanda closed her suitcase with a decisive snap, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel delivering final verdict. Maria, would you please confirm that my documents have been securely transferred to the vehicle? The housekeeper nodded with obvious satisfaction. Yes, Mrs. Johnson. All 15 boxes of financial records, the safe deposit box contents, and your personal files are loaded and secured. Jessica's eyes widened with dawning horror. What documents? 7 years of meticulous record-keeping, Amanda explained with professional detachment. Bank statements, email correspondences, recorded phone conversations, CC filing irregularities, tax document discrepancies, and my personal favorite, the complete Peterson account reconstruction that proves systematic investor. Fraud dating back to your company's initial public offering. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows one final time, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline that would soon bow to her influence rather than Michael's inherited mediocrity. The city pulsed with evening energy, millions of people pursuing their ambitions while unaware that they were witnessing the transfer of significant power. Mrs. Johnson, Maria said softly, the building manager and several neighbors have gathered in the lobby. They wish to pay their respects. Amanda's smile transformed from arctic to genuinely warm, the first authentic emotion she had displayed in 48 hours. How thoughtful. I shall greet them before departing. She turned to Michael and Jessica, who stood frozen like deer, sensing an approaching predator. I want to express gratitude for this experience. You've provided me with the perfect motivation to demonstrate what happens when people mistake temporary inconvenience for permanent defeat. Amanda glided toward the penthouse entrance, her heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of a countdown timer reaching 0. Behind her she heard Jessica's panicked whisper, Michael, what have we done? The elevator descended through 15 floors of Manhattan luxury, carrying Amanda toward the lobby where her future awaited. Through the mirrored walls, she observed her reflection, a woman transformed by betrayal into something far more dangerous than she had ever been as a wife. The lobby doors opened to reveal Mrs. Chen from the 12th floor, Mr. Rodriguez from the penthouse across the hall, and 3 other neighbors who had witnessed Amanda's grace under pressure over the years. They stood in respectful formation, their expressions conveying admiration rather than pity. Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Chen said formally, "We wanted you to know that your dignity throughout this difficult situation has been an inspiration to all of us." Amanda inclined her head graciously, accepting their tribute with queenly composure. "Your support means more than you realize. Change can be intimidating, but it also creates opportunities for those brave enough to seize them." Mr. Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice carrying quiet intensity. "If there's anything you need, references, connections, business introductions, please don't hesitate to contact any of us." "Thank you," Amanda replied with genuine warmth. "I suspect our paths will cross again under more favorable circumstances." She walked through the building's marble lobby toward the street, where her black Bentley waited like a royal carriage. The driver, a distinguished gentleman named James, who had served Manhattan's elite for 2 decades, opened the rear door with ceremonial precision. "Where to, Mrs. Johnson?" he inquired respectfully. "The St. Regis," Amanda replied, settling into the leather interior with fluid elegance. "The presidential suite has been prepared for my arrival." As the Bentley pulled away from the building that had housed her former life, Amanda permitted herself one glance backward at the penthouse windows. Michael and Jessica were visible as small figures pressed against the glass, watching her departure with expressions of mounting dread. Amanda retrieved her phone and placed a call that would initiate the next phase of her strategic campaign. "Jennifer, Amanda Johnson, the preliminary phase is complete. Initiate full disclosure protocols Monday morning. Yes, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence." She paused, watching Manhattan's lights blur past the window as her new life accelerated into motion. "And Jennifer, make sure the press receives advance copies. I want this story to lead every business publication in the city." The Bentley merged into Manhattan traffic, carrying Amanda Johnson toward her coronation as the city's newest power broker. Behind them, the penthouse grew smaller until it disappeared entirely, much like Michael's relevance in her expanding universe. The Queen has left the building. Now watch the castle crumble. Chapter 3. The Empire Begins. Every revolution starts with a single phone call from someone who refuses to lose. 10 days after her departure from Park Avenue, Amanda Johnson sat in the corner office of a newly leased Midtown Manhattan suite, her growing belly barely visible beneath a tailored charcoal Armani blazer. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the Chrysler Building, and the space hummed with the energy of empire building in its earliest, most dangerous phase. At nearly 4 months pregnant, Amanda had discovered that expectant motherhood sharpened rather than dulled her predatory instincts. The child growing within her seemed to fuel an almost supernatural level of strategic clarity, as if her unborn daughter was already contributing to the family business of total domination. Her phone rang with the distinctive chime reserved for priority contacts. Johnson Strategic Consulting, Amanda speaking. "Amanda, it's Richard Thompson from Morrison Industries." The voice carried the exhausted relief of a man who had found salvation after months of corporate chaos. "I've been reviewing the strategic analysis you sent yesterday regarding our expansion into the European markets. It's absolutely brilliant, exactly the kind of innovative thinking we've been missing," Amanda smiled. Making notes on the legal pad that already contained the names of 17 Fortune 500 companies she intended to acquire as clients within 60 days. "I'm pleased you found it valuable, Richard. When would you like to schedule our implementation meeting?" "As soon as possible. I'm terminating our contract with Davis Technologies immediately. Their recent strategic recommendations have been not just inadequate, but actively harmful to our quarterly projections. Thompson's voice carried the bitter tone of someone who had discovered they'd been paying premium rates for amateur advice. Can you handle a complete corporate restructuring project worth approximately $50 million in implementation costs? Amanda's pen stopped moving as she processed the magnitude of what she'd just accomplished. Morrison Industries had been Michael's largest client for 3 years, representing nearly 40% of his company's annual revenue. In a single phone call, she had just delivered a devastating blow to his financial foundation. "Richard, I would be honored to guide Morrison through this transition," she replied with professional composure that concealed her inner triumph. "I'll have my team prepare a comprehensive proposal by tomorrow morning." After ending the call, Amanda allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of pure satisfaction before placing the next strategic phone call. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, selecting another name from her carefully cultivated network of Manhattan's most powerful executives. Charles Morrison. "Amanda Johnson, I hope you received the market analysis I sent regarding your pharmaceutical division's expansion opportunities." She paused, listening to his enthusiastic response. "Excellent. I'm calling to inform you that I'm now accepting select clients for my new strategic consulting firm. Would you be interested in discussing an exclusive advisory relationship?" Within 15 minutes, Amanda had secured Morrison Pharmaceuticals as her second major client, representing another $30 million in annual consulting fees. More importantly, she had just claimed Michael's second-largest account, leaving his company hemorrhaging revenue at a rate that would force bankruptcy within 6 months. Her assistant, Rebecca Martinez, a Harvard MBA graduate Amanda had poached from Goldman Sachs, appeared in the doorway, carrying a thick folder of documents. "Mrs. Johnson, the background reports you requested have arrived. Also, Jennifer Matthews is holding on line 3. Thank you, Rebecca. Please schedule client meetings for Morrison Industries and Morrison Pharmaceuticals for tomorrow morning and afternoon, respectively. Then contact the Peterson Group and inform them that I'm prepared to discuss their infrastructure project." Amanda gestured toward the chair across from her desk. "And please sit down. I want your analysis of the Davis Technologies financial projections." Rebecca settled into the leather chair, opening the folder with the efficient movements of someone accustomed to handling sensitive corporate intelligence. "The numbers are devastating, Mrs. Johnson. With the Morrison accounts terminated, Davis Technologies has lost 67% of their annual revenue base. Their operating expenses exceed income by approximately $4 million monthly. Unless they secure major new contracts immediately, they'll face insolvency by spring." Amanda nodded with satisfaction. "What about their other client relationships? Surprisingly vulnerable. Most of their remaining contracts were secured through your strategic recommendations during your marriage. Without your expertise, they're delivering substandard results that have clients questioning their competence." Rebecca flipped through several pages of financial analysis. "The Peterson Group has already begun inquiries about alternative consulting options." "Perfect." Amanda pressed the button connecting her to Jennifer Matthews. "Jennifer, what delightful news do you have for me?" "Amanda, the SEC investigation is proceeding faster than anticipated. They've requested additional documentation regarding the Peterson account irregularities, and the FBI has begun preliminary inquiries into the tax evasion allegations." Jennifer's voice carried the satisfaction of a lawyer who had built an unassailable case. "Michael's legal team is scrambling to arrange plea negotiations, but frankly, the evidence is overwhelming." Amanda felt the child in her womb shift slightly, as if responding to the energy of victory. "What about the divorce proceedings?" "We'll file the amended petition Monday morning. Given the criminal fraud evidence, the prenuptial agreement is completely void. You're entitled to 50% of all marital assets, plus damages for emotional distress and corporate theft. I estimate the settlement will exceed 20 million, not including the value of intellectual property you developed during the marriage. Excellent. However, Jennifer, I want you to understand that money is secondary to impact. I want Michael's reputation destroyed so completely that he'll never work in this industry again. Consider it accomplished. The Wall Street Journal received the exclusive story this morning. They're planning a front-page exposé for Wednesday's edition titled "The Fall of Davis Technologies: How Corporate Fraud Destroyed a Marriage and an Empire." After concluding the call, Amanda stood and walked to her windows, observing the Manhattan skyline that was rapidly becoming her domain rather than Michael's inherited playground. The city pulsed with afternoon energy, millions of ambitious people pursuing their dreams while unknowingly witnessing the rise of a new corporate dynasty. Rebecca cleared her throat respectfully. "Mrs. Johnson, there's one more item requiring your attention. Jessica Miller contacted our office this morning, requesting a private meeting." Amanda turned from the window, her expression shifting from satisfaction to amused curiosity. "How fascinating. What reason did she provide?" "She claims to have information that might be mutually beneficial regarding Michael's business practices. Apparently, she's reconsidering her romantic choices now that his financial situation has deteriorated." "Schedule the meeting for tomorrow at 4, Amanda decided after a moment's consideration. "I'm curious to observe how quickly loyalty evaporates when survival becomes questionable." Her phone buzzed with an incoming text message from an unknown number. The words made her smile with predatory satisfaction. "Amanda, this is Michael. We need to talk. Please call me immediately. Everything can be worked out if we discuss this reasonably." Amanda showed the message to Rebecca, who read it with obvious amusement. "Should I prepare a response?" "No response necessary," Amanda replied, deleting the message without a second thought. "Desperation is never attractive, and I have no interest in negotiating with someone who has nothing left to offer." She returned to her desk, where a stack of contracts awaited her signature. Agreements that would establish Johnson Strategic Consulting as Manhattan's premier corporate advisory firm within 90 days. Each signature represented another step toward total market domination and Michael's complete professional exile. The intercom chimed with Rebecca's voice. "Mrs. Johnson, the Peterson Group is on line 1. They're ready to discuss terminating their relationship with Davis." "Technologies," Amanda picked up the phone. With the confidence of someone who had already won a war her enemies didn't realize they were fighting. "Peterson Group, this is Amanda Johnson. I understand you're interested in discussing strategic alternatives for your infrastructure development project." As she began outlining the comprehensive consultation package that would represent another devastating blow to Michael's crumbling empire, Amanda felt her daughter respond to the energy of conquest with a gentle kick that seemed to say, "Well done, mother. Now show them what true power looks like." The afternoon sun cast golden light across her new domain, illuminating the contracts and client files that represented the foundation of an empire built not on inheritance or privilege, but on intelligence, strategy, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. "They said I couldn't build an empire while pregnant. Watch me build 2. Chapter 4. The Public Stage. The most dangerous woman in the room is the one who smiles while she destroys. You. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Temple of Dender glowed with golden light as Manhattan's elite gathered for the annual Winter Charity Gala. The kind of exclusive event where billion-dollar deals were negotiated between champagne toasts and where social hierarchies were established with the precision of military campaigns. Amanda Johnson arrived precisely at 8:30, fashionably late enough to ensure maximum impact, but early enough to demonstrate she operated by her own schedule rather than social convention. At 4 months pregnant, Amanda had never looked more magnificent. Her custom Valentino gown, a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that cost more than most people's annual salaries, had been tailored to accommodate her changing figure while accentuating her natural elegance. The subtle curve of her belly was visible but not prominent, suggesting strength and fertility rather than vulnerability. Her jewelry was minimal but devastating. Platinum and diamond earrings that caught the museum lighting like captured stars, and her wedding ring conspicuously absent from her left hand. Mrs. Johnson greeted Harrison Mills, the oil executive whose company Amanda had restructured the previous year, saving him approximately $200 million in projected losses. "You look absolutely radiant this evening." Amanda smiled with the genuine warmth she reserved for those who had proven their intelligence and loyalty. "Harrison, thank you. I trust the Venezuelan expansion is proceeding according to our projections." "Better than projected, actually. Your strategic modifications increased our efficiency by 37%. Mills gestured toward the crowded reception area, where Manhattan's power elite mingled beneath ancient Egyptian artifacts. "I've been sharing your success story with several colleagues tonight. 3 Fortune 500 CEOs have specifically requested introductions." "How thoughtful," Amanda replied, accepting a glass of sparkling water from a passing server. "I'm always interested in connecting with visionary leaders who understand the value of strategic innovation." The crowd seemed to part naturally as Amanda moved through the reception, conversations pausing momentarily as heads turned in her direction. The Wall Street Journal article published the previous week had transformed her from Michael, Davis's ex-wife, into Manhattan's most sought-after strategic consultant, and the business world was taking notice. Amanda called Victoria Sterling, the pharmaceutical heiress whose family foundation was hosting the evening's event. "I was hoping you'd attend tonight. There are several people I'm absolutely dying to introduce you to." As Victoria guided her toward a cluster of distinguished guests, Amanda became aware of a disturbance near the museum's main entrance. Michael Davis had arrived with Jessica Miller, both dressed as if attending a costume party themed around desperate social climbing. Michael wore a tuxedo that looked expensive but fit poorly, suggesting financial constraints had forced him toward rental rather than custom tailoring. Jessica's dress, a garishly sequined creation that belonged at a casino rather than the Metropolitan Museum, clung to her enhanced curves with the subtlety of advertising. "My God," whispered Victoria, following Amanda's gaze. "Is that actually Michael Davis? I heard his company was facing some difficulties, but he looks absolutely haggard." Amanda observed her former husband with clinical detachment. Michael's face showed the strain of 3 weeks spent watching his empire collapse in real time, dark circles beneath his eyes, premature aging around his mouth, and the nervous energy of someone perpetually on the verge of panic. Jessica clung to his arm with increasing desperation, clearly aware that she had tied her social aspirations to a sinking vessel. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the evening's master of ceremonies, "please join us in the main hall for tonight's presentation and auction." The crowd moved collectively toward the museum's grand staircase, a migration of Manhattan's most powerful individuals seeking entertainment and tax-deductible charitable giving. Amanda found herself naturally positioned near the front of the procession, her presence commanding respect from people who controlled billions in assets and influenced global markets. The main hall had been transformed into an elegant auction venue, with carefully arranged seating that reflected the city's social hierarchy. Amanda was escorted to a prime table near the front, surrounded by pharmaceutical executives, real estate moguls, and technology innovators who represented the future of American capitalism. Michael and Jessica were seated toward the back of the room, their isolation so complete it might have been orchestrated by a social pariah coordinator. Amanda could see them attempting to engage neighboring tables in conversation, their efforts met with polite disinterest that bordered on contempt. "Before we begin tonight's auction," announced Victoria Sterling from the podium, "I want to recognize someone who has become an inspiration to many of us in the business community. Amanda Johnson, whose strategic consulting firm has revolutionized corporate efficiency for numerous Fortune 500 companies, and who has demonstrated that personal adversity can become professional triumph." The applause began as scattered acknowledgement, but quickly grew into sustained appreciation that echoed through the museum's marble halls. Amanda rose gracefully, acknowledging the recognition with the poise of someone accustomed to public acclaim. She had not expected this moment, but she embraced it with the natural confidence of a born leader. "Mrs. Johnson," Victoria continued, "would you share a few words about the importance of supporting organizations that empower women in business?" Amanda walked to the podium with fluid elegance, her hand moving instinctively to her belly in a gesture that was both maternal and powerful. The room fell completely silent, 700 of Manhattan's most influential people waiting for her words. "Thank you, Victoria, and thank you all for your generous support of tonight's cause," Amanda began, her voice carrying the authority that had once silenced hostile corporate boards. "As many of you know, the past month has been a period of significant transition in my life. I've learned that true strength isn't measured by our ability to avoid adversity, but by our capacity to transform challenges into opportunities." She paused, allowing her gaze to sweep across the audience until it settled briefly on Michael and Jessica's table. "I'm often asked about the secret to successful strategic consulting. The answer is simple. Never underestimate your opponent's weaknesses and never overestimate their strengths. The most devastating mistakes in business occur when people confuse temporary advantages with permanent power." The silence was profound, broken only by the subtle sounds of expensive jewelry shifting as the audience leaned forward to absorb every word. This foundation supports women who refuse to accept limitations imposed by others' expectations. Tonight, I'm announcing that Johnson Strategic Consulting will be establishing a $10 million scholarship fund for women pursuing advanced business degrees. Because the future belongs to those brave enough to build it, rather than those content to inherit it. The applause exploded like thunder, hundreds of Manhattan's elite rising to their feet in sustained appreciation. Amanda remained at the podium, accepting the ovation with royal composure while observing the impact of her words on strategic targets throughout the audience. At the back of the room, Michael's face had gone ashen. Jessica appeared to be having difficulty breathing, her artificial composure cracking as she realized the magnitude of the power shift occurring before her eyes. Furthermore, Amanda continued as the applause gradually subsided, "I'm pleased to announce that 3 major Fortune 500 companies have committed to implementing our revolutionary efficiency protocols over the coming year, representing approximately $200 million in economic impact." Charles Morrison, the pharmaceutical executive whose company Amanda had recently secured as a client, stood and began applauding again. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet once more, the ovation lasting nearly 2 full minutes. As Amanda returned to her seat, she was immediately surrounded by executives eager to discuss potential business relationships. Business cards appeared from every direction, along with invitations to private dinners, exclusive retreats, and high-level strategic planning sessions. "Amanda," said William Harrison, the technology billionaire whose AI company dominated global markets, "I've been following your work with Morrison Industries. Would you be available for a private consultation regarding our expansion into European markets?" "I'd be delighted to discuss it," Amanda replied, accepting his card with professional grace. "Have your people contact Rebecca Martinez tomorrow morning to schedule a preliminary meeting." Meanwhile, across the room, Michael and Jessica sat in increasing isolation as neighboring tables actively avoided interaction with them. The Wall Street Journal article had made Michael radioactive in Manhattan business circles, and Jessica's association with his fraud investigation had rendered her equally unwelcome. "We should leave," Jessica whispered urgently, her voice carrying panic that was audible to nearby tables. "This is humiliating." "We can't leave," Michael replied through gritted teeth. "That would make us look guilty." "We are guilty," Jessica shot back, her composure finally cracking completely. "And everyone in this room knows it." Amanda observed their disintegration with detached satisfaction while simultaneously engaging in conversations that would cement her position as Manhattan's premier strategic consultant. The evening had exceeded her most optimistic expectations, transforming what might have been an awkward social encounter into a coronation ceremony. As the formal program concluded and guests began socializing over coffee and dessert, Amanda found herself at the center of Manhattan's power structure. CEOs sought her advice, pharmaceutical executives discussed potential partnerships, and technology innovators requested strategic guidance for international expansion. The contrast with Michael's situation could not have been more complete. He and Jessica made their exit during the dessert course, slipping away like shadows, while the room's attention remained focused on Amanda's magnetic presence. "Mrs. Johnson," said Harrison Mills as the evening wound toward its conclusion, "I hope you'll consider this just the beginning of your emergence as Manhattan's most influential business leader. Tonight's response suggests you have unlimited potential for impact." Amanda smiled with the confidence of someone who had just watched her enemies destroy themselves in public. "Harrison, I believe the most important victories are the ones that seem effortless to outside observers. Tonight wasn't about defeating anyone. It was about demonstrating what happens when intelligence meets opportunity. I didn't come here to compete, darling. I came here to win." Chapter 5. The Weapon in Her Womb. They called my pregnancy a weakness. I turned it into a war cry. The boardroom at Johnson's Strategic Consulting hummed with controlled intensity as Amanda Johnson, now visibly pregnant at 5 months, commanded the attention of 12 Fortune 500 executives seated around the custom Italian marble conference table. Her emerald green Armani maternity suit had been tailored to perfection, accentuating rather than concealing her growing belly, transforming what lesser women might consider a liability into a symbol of unassailable power. "Gentlemen," Amanda said, her voice carrying the authority that had made grown men restructure billion-dollar corporations based on her recommendations. "The Peterson Infrastructure Project represents the largest municipal development opportunity in New York's history. The consulting firm that secures this contract will establish dominance in urban planning for the next decade." Charles Morrison leaned forward, his pharmaceutical empire having grown by 30% since partnering with Amanda 6 weeks earlier. "What's your projected timeline for implementation?" "Amanda, 6 months for preliminary assessment, 18 months for complete infrastructure redesign, and a 5-year maintenance contract worth approximately $80 million annually." Amanda's hand moved to her belly in a gesture that had become her signature. Maternal protection combined with strategic dominance. "The child I'm carrying will grow up in a city reshaped by our vision." Harrison Mills, whose oil company had seen record profits after implementing Amanda's efficiency protocols, nodded approvingly. "The symbolism is perfect. Building the future while literally creating the future." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, Amanda could see the December snow beginning to dust Manhattan's skyline. Winter in New York was brutal and unforgiving, much like the business environment she had learned to dominate with surgical precision. Her pregnancy had progressed beautifully, each week bringing increased energy rather than the fatigue other women experienced. Her assistant Rebecca appeared in the doorway with an expression that suggested urgent but positive news. "Mrs. Johnson, there's been a development regarding the Peterson project. The mayor's office has requested an immediate meeting. Reschedule for tomorrow morning, Amanda replied without hesitation. And contact Jennifer Matthews. I want a full legal review of the municipal contracting protocols before we proceed. After the executives had departed with their new marching orders, Amanda settled into her leather chair and opened the folder containing intelligence reports on Michael's deteriorating situation. The photographs were devastating, Michael looking haggard outside unemployment offices, Jessica working as a hostess at a midtown restaurant, both of them living in a studio apartment in Queens that cost less per month than Amanda's daily consulting fees. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Amanda's instincts told her to ignore it, but curiosity won. Johnson Strategic Consulting. Amanda, please don't hang up. This is Jessica. The voice was barely recognizable. Gone was the artificial confidence, replaced by genuine desperation. I need to speak with you. It's about Michael, about things you need to know. Miss Miller, Amanda replied with professional detachment, I believe we have nothing to discuss. You're wrong. Michael has been planning something that involves your pregnancy, your business, everything. Jessica's voice cracked with exhaustion. Please just give me 10 minutes. I have information that could protect you. Amanda considered the request with tactical precision. Information was currency in Manhattan's business world, and even desperate sources could provide valuable intelligence. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, my office. Come alone, and come prepared to provide substantive information. That evening, Amanda attended the Manhattan Business Women's Association annual dinner, where she had been invited as the keynote speaker. The Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom glowed with crystal. Chandeliers as 500 of the city's most successful professional women gathered to celebrate achievements and plan strategic initiatives for the coming year. Ladies, Amanda began from the podium, her pregnancy clearly visible in the elegant spotlight. I stand before you tonight as living proof that our greatest challenges can become our most powerful weapons. 5 months ago, I discovered that the man I had trusted with my heart and my business insights had chosen betrayal over loyalty. The audience leaned forward collectively, captivated by Amanda's magnetic presence and the raw honesty of her words. I was pregnant, abandoned, and publicly humiliated. Traditional wisdom suggested I should retreat, recover quietly, and rebuild slowly. Amanda's smile was radiant with triumph. Instead, I chose to demonstrate that pregnant women don't withdraw from battle. We bring reinforcements. The applause began as scattered appreciation, but quickly crescendoed into thunderous approval that lasted nearly 2 full minutes. Amanda stood gracefully, her hand resting on her belly in a gesture that conveyed both vulnerability and strength. This child represents more than my personal future. She represents the next generation of women who will refuse to accept limitations imposed by others' expectations. My pregnancy hasn't slowed my business expansion. It has accelerated it. My clients don't see weakness when they look at me. They see someone so confident in her abilities that she's willing to build an empire while building a family. The standing ovation was immediate and sustained. 500 successful women acknowledging Amanda as their undisputed champion. In the audience, reporters from the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Fortune magazine scribbled notes frantically, recognizing they were witnessing the emergence of a genuine business icon. Furthermore, Amanda continued as the applause subsided, I'm announcing tonight that Johnson Strategic Consulting has been selected as the primary contractor for the Peterson Infrastructure Project. This $80 million initiative will reshape Manhattan's development patterns for the next decade. The room erupted again, this time with the energy of women celebrating not just Amanda's success, but the victory of every professional woman who had ever been underestimated because of her gender or personal circumstances. Later that evening, as Amanda's car transported her through Manhattan's glittering streets. She reflected on the magnitude of her transformation. 6 months earlier, she had been Michael Davis's wife, respected but secondary. Tonight, she was Amanda Johnson, Manhattan's most influential strategic consultant, carrying the next generation of female leadership in her womb. Her phone rang with Rebecca's number. "Mrs. Johnson, I apologize for calling so late, but there's been an incident. Michael Davis was arrested this evening outside the Waldorf Astoria. Apparently, he was attempting to gain access to the business dinner, claiming he needed to speak with you urgently about important matters regarding your pregnancy." Amanda felt a surge of protective energy, her maternal instincts combining with her strategic mind to create something far more dangerous than Michael could have anticipated. "Was he alone?" "Yes, ma'am. Jessica Miller wasn't with him. The police report indicates he was intoxicated and making incoherent statements about legal rights and paternity issues." "Contact Jennifer Matthews immediately. I want a full restraining order filed by tomorrow morning. And Rebecca, begin compiling documentation for a harassment lawsuit. If Michael Davis wants to make my pregnancy a legal issue, I'll demonstrate why that's the most expensive mistake he could possibly make." The next morning, Amanda met with Jessica Miller in her office conference room, observing with clinical interest as the woman who had once seemed so confident now appeared broken by the reality of her choices. Jessica's designer wardrobe had been replaced by department store clothing, and her perfectly maintained appearance showed signs of financial strain. "Thank you for seeing me," Jessica began, her voice lacking any trace of her former arrogance. "I know you have every reason to hate me." "I don't hate you," Amanda replied with complete honesty. "Hatred requires emotional investment, and you simply don't warrant that level of attention." Jessica flinched at the dismissal but continued. "Michael has been obsessing over your pregnancy. He believes the child might be his, and he's been talking to lawyers about paternity rights, custody claims, anything he can use to force you back into his life." Amanda's expression didn't change, but internally she felt the child respond to her surge of protective fury with a strong kick that seemed to say, "Show them what we're made of." "Mother, how fascinating," Amanda said calmly. "Does Michael understand that paternity requires conception during our marriage, and that medical records clearly establish the timeline of my pregnancy? He's not thinking rationally. The bankruptcy, the criminal charges, losing everything. He's desperate enough to try anything." Jessica leaned forward desperately. "I'm telling you this because I realize now that I destroyed my life for someone who was never worth it. Michael Davis is not the man either of us thought he was." Amanda stood and walked to her windows, observing the Manhattan skyline that increasingly reflected her influence rather than Michael's fading relevance. "Miss Miller, I appreciate the information. However, you seem to misunderstand something fundamental about my situation." She turned back to face Jessica, her pregnancy radiating power rather than vulnerability. "I'm not afraid of Michael's desperation. I welcome it. Every foolish move he makes provides additional ammunition for the complete destruction of his reputation and the permanent protection of my family." Jessica's face showed dawning comprehension of Amanda's absolute confidence. "You want him to challenge you legally." "I want him to try everything in his pathetic arsenal," Amanda confirmed with serene certainty. "Because when the dust settles, everyone will understand that Amanda Johnson doesn't just win battles. She eliminates threats so completely they never recover. This child isn't just my daughter, she's my dynasty." In Chapter 6, the mistress cracks the other. Woman always discovers she was never the main character. The studio apartment in Queens felt like a prison cell compared to the Park Avenue penthouse Jessica Miller had briefly called home. January wind rattled the single window while she sat on the threadbare couch, watching Amanda Johnson's interview on Bloomberg television with a mixture of fascination and growing horror. On the screen, Amanda radiated confidence and authority, her 6-month pregnancy adding regal gravitas to her already commanding presence. The key to strategic consulting, Amanda was saying to the interviewer, is understanding that every challenge contains the seeds of its own solution. When my personal life underwent dramatic changes last year, I chose to view disruption as opportunity rather than defeat. Jessica turned up the volume, desperate to understand how the woman she had so carelessly dismissed had transformed into Manhattan's most celebrated business leader, while her own life had disintegrated into poverty and regret. "Mrs. Johnson," the interviewer continued, "your firm has secured over $300 million in contracts since November. How do you balance such rapid expansion with preparing for motherhood?" Amanda's smile was luminous with triumph. "My daughter isn't separate from my business success. She's part of it. Every contract I negotiate, every strategic decision I make, is building the world she'll inherit. Pregnancy hasn't slowed my ambitions. It's given them deeper purpose." The camera captured Amanda's hand moving to her belly in the gesture that had become her trademark. Protective, powerful, and utterly confident. Jessica felt something break inside her chest as she recognized the gulf between Amanda's soaring trajectory and her own catastrophic fall. "Turn that off." Michael's voice cut through the apartment like a blade. He emerged from the bathroom, his appearance shocking even by recent standards. Unshaven, wearing the same clothes for 3 days, his eyes held the manic intensity of someone teetering on the edge of complete breakdown. "She's talking about the Peterson project again," Jessica said softly, not moving to change the channel. $80 million, Michael. That could have been yours. It was mine," Michael exploded, his voice cracking with hysteria. "That project, those clients, that entire network, I built all of it. She stole my life, my future, everything I worked for." Jessica watched him pace the cramped apartment like a caged animal, his movements erratic and increasingly violent. This was not the confident businessman who had seduced her away from her previous relationship. This was something broken, something dangerous. "Maybe you should stop watching her interviews," Jessica suggested carefully. "It's not healthy." "Don't tell me what's healthy." Michael spun toward her, his face twisted with rage that seemed directed as much at her as at Amanda. "You have no idea what I've lost because of her manipulation." Jessica flinched at his tone, suddenly aware that she was trapped in 800 square feet with someone whose sanity was rapidly deteriorating. "Michael, please calm down. Getting angry won't change anything." "Won't change anything," he laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "Jessica, I've been working on something that will change everything. Amanda thinks she's untouchable, but she's made one crucial mistake." "What are you talking about?" Michael walked to their tiny kitchen table, pulling out a manila folder filled with documents, photographs, and what appeared to be surveillance reports. "I've been documenting her business practices, her client meetings, her personal routines. There are inconsistencies in her corporate filings, potential conflicts of interest, violations that could bring down her entire empire." Jessica felt cold dread spreading through her stomach as she realized the extent of Michael's obsession. "You've been following her, taking pictures." "I've been gathering evidence," Michael corrected, his eyes gleaming with manic purpose. "Amanda Johnson isn't the business genius everyone thinks she is. She's a fraud, just like she always accused me of being. And when I expose her, when I destroy her reputation the way she destroyed mine, everything will go back to the way it was meant to be." "Michael, this is insane. You can't what? Can't fight back. Can't reclaim what's rightfully mine." He grabbed Jessica's shoulders with enough force to leave bruises. "That child she's carrying could be mine, Jessica. The timeline is suspicious, and if I can prove paternity, I can claim custody rights, force her into negotiations, make her understand that she can't simply erase me from existence." Jessica stared at him in horror, finally understanding the depth of his delusion. Michael wasn't just financially bankrupt, he was mentally unhinged, driven by obsession to construct fantasies that had no basis in reality. "The baby isn't yours," she said quietly. "We both know the conception timeline. You were with me when—" "Shut up!" Michael shoved her backward, sending her stumbling against the wall. "You don't know anything. You're just another mistake, another complication I have to manage while I fix this situation." The words hit Jessica like physical blows, stripping away the last vestiges of her self-deception. She had destroyed her career, her reputation, and her future for a man who viewed her as disposable, a temporary distraction, while he remained obsessed with the wife he had betrayed. On the television, Amanda's interview continued, the camera capturing her in the elegant conference room where she commanded respect from Fortune 500 executives. The contrast between Amanda's rising empire and Jessica's collapsing reality was so stark, it seemed impossible they existed in the same universe. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amanda was saying, "success in strategic consulting requires understanding human psychology as much as business fundamentals. People make decisions based on emotion first, then rationalize with logic afterward. The most effective consultants are those who can predict emotional responses and plan accordingly." Jessica realized with crushing clarity that Amanda had predicted everything. Michael's breakdown, her own regret, the inevitable self-destruction that would follow their betrayal. While they had been playing at romance, Amanda had been orchestrating their mutual destruction with surgical precision. Michael was still ranting about lawsuits and custody claims, his voice becoming increasingly shrill as his paranoid theories grew more elaborate. Jessica stopped listening, focusing instead on Amanda's composed presence on the screen. "My advice to young women entering the business world," Amanda continued, "is to never allow anyone to define your value or limit your potential. The moment you accept someone else's assessment of your worth, you begin to shrink rather than grow." The irony was devastating. Jessica had spent her entire adult life seeking validation from men like Michael, compromising her integrity for temporary security, accepting limitations others imposed rather than building her own foundation. Amanda had faced the same betrayal Jessica had helped orchestrate, yet had emerged stronger, wealthier, and more influential than ever. "I need to get out of here," Jessica said suddenly, interrupting Michael's increasingly incoherent monologue about business conspiracies and legal revenge. "What? Where are you going?" Michael's paranoia immediately shifted focus. "You can't leave now. I need you here while I execute this plan." "What plan, Michael?" "Stalking your pregnant ex-wife, taking photographs like some deranged private investigator, filing frivolous lawsuits that no lawyer will touch." Jessica gathered her coat and purse with movements that felt like escape velocity. "This isn't a plan, it's a mental breakdown. You can't abandon me too." Michael's voice cracked with desperation. "Everyone's abandoning me, but I thought you understood what we were fighting for." Jessica paused at the apartment door, looking back at the man who had cost her everything worth having. "Michael, we're not fighting for anything. You're fighting against reality, and I'm finally done pretending your delusions make sense. If you leave, you'll have nothing. No job, no money, no future." "I already have nothing," Jessica replied with brutal honesty. "The difference is, now I know it's my own fault rather than someone else's conspiracy." She walked out into the January cold, leaving Michael screaming threats and promises into the empty apartment. On the street, she pulled out her phone and looked up the contact information for Johnson's Strategic Consulting, wondering if there was any possibility of redemption for someone who had made every wrong choice at every crucial moment. The Bloomberg interview was concluding as she walked past an electronics store display. On dozen screens, Amanda Johnson smiled with serene confidence, her hand resting on her belly as she discussed building empires and raising the next generation of leaders. Jessica stopped walking. staring at the multiple images of the woman whose life she had tried to steal, finally understanding the magnitude of her miscalculation. She hadn't competed with Amanda Johnson. She had simply revealed her own irrelevance while Amanda conquered Manhattan. I thought I was stealing a king. I was just babysitting a coward. Chapter 7. The tables turn. Revenge is a dish best served with interest rates and hostile takeovers. The February snow fell steadily outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Johnson Strategic Consulting, blanketing Manhattan in pristine white that reflected the morning sun like scattered diamonds. Amanda Johnson sat behind her custom mahogany desk, now 7 months pregnant and radiating the kind of maternal authority that had made her the most sought-after strategic consultant in North America. Her burgundy silk maternity dress, tailored by the same designer who clothed European royalty, accentuated both her pregnancy and her power with breathtaking elegance. The intercom chimed with Rebecca's voice. "Mrs. Johnson, security is reporting an unauthorized visitor in the lobby. Michael Davis is demanding to speak with you, claiming it's urgent business regarding bankruptcy proceedings." Amanda's hand moved instinctively to her belly, where her daughter responded to the mention of her biological father's name with a strong kick that seemed to say, "Handle this, Mother." At 7 months, the pregnancy had reached the stage where Amanda's maternal instincts had merged seamlessly with her business acumen, creating something far more formidable than either force alone. "Have security escort him to conference room B," Amanda decided after a moment's consideration. "Full documentation protocol, cameras, audio recording, and witness present. I want every word of this conversation preserved for legal purposes." 20 minutes later, Amanda entered the conference room to find Michael Davis slumped in a chair like a defeated general awaiting terms of surrender. 3 months of complete professional and personal collapse had aged him a decade. His hair had gone prematurely grey. His face showed the sunken features of someone who had lost significant weight, and his clothes hung loosely on his diminished frame like expensive fabric draped over a scarecrow. "Michael," Amanda said, settling into the chair across from him with fluid grace despite her advanced pregnancy. "I understand you wish to discuss business matters." "Amanda, please." His voice cracked with exhaustion and desperation. "I know you hate me. I know I destroyed everything good between us, but I'm drowning. The federal investigation, the asset seizures, the complete destruction of everything I built. I need your help." Amanda studied him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen. "Help? How fascinating! What exactly do you imagine I could do to assist someone in your circumstances? You have influence now, connections I could never match. Your consulting firm has relationships with every major corporation in Manhattan. One word from you, one recommendation, could give me a chance to rebuild." Michael leaned forward desperately. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, just for an opportunity to survive." "Survive," Amanda repeated, tasting the word like fine wine. "An interesting choice of terminology. Tell me, Michael, what exactly are you surviving?" "The FBI investigation is nearly complete. They're preparing federal indictments for securities fraud, tax evasion, and investor manipulation. My lawyer says I'm looking at 7 to 10 years in federal prison unless I can demonstrate cooperation and restitution." Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. "Everything is gone, Amanda. The company, the assets, the reputation, there's nothing left." Amanda's expression remained serene as she processed the magnitude of Michael's destruction. Her strategic campaign had succeeded beyond even her most optimistic projections, systematically dismantling his empire while building her own into something unprecedented in Manhattan's business history. "And Jessica?" Amanda inquired with polite interest. "How is Miss Miller managing these challenging circumstances?" "Jessica left me 3 weeks ago. She said she couldn't watch me destroy myself with obsession and paranoia." Michael's laugh was bitter and broken. She was probably right. I've spent the last 3 months plotting ways to hurt you, to expose you, to somehow drag you down to my level. But you were always 3 moves ahead, weren't you? I was, Amanda confirmed with simple honesty. While you were planning betrayal, I was preparing for war. While you were celebrating your supposed victory, I was documenting your crimes. While you were assuming I would collapse quietly, I was building an empire that makes your former company look like a neighborhood lemonade stand. She stood and walked to the window, her pregnancy evident, but in no way diminishing her commanding presence. Manhattan stretched out below them, a city that now responded to her influence rather than his inherited mediocrity. You want to know the difference between us, Michael? I build things that last. You inherited things that crumble. Amanda turned back to face him, her dark eyes holding no trace of mercy. Your father's connections, your trust fund advantages, your assumption that being born wealthy made you intelligent, all of it was built on quicksand. I know I was wrong about everything, Michael said, his voice breaking completely. I know I threw away the best thing in my life for someone who never mattered. But Amanda, I'm begging you, not as your ex-husband, not as someone who hurt you, but as someone who's about to lose everything. Please help me. Amanda returned to her chair, moving with the deliberate grace of someone who held absolute power over another person's fate. You're asking me to help you. Let me understand this correctly. You want the woman whose marriage you destroyed, whose trust you betrayed, whose business insights you stole, to somehow rescue you from the consequences of your own actions. I know how it sounds. It sounds like the fantasy of someone who fundamentally misunderstands the nature of power, Amanda interrupted, her voice cutting through his desperation like surgical steel. Let me explain something about consequences, Michael. When you left those divorce papers on our kitchen counter, you weren't just ending a marriage, you were declaring war on someone who had spent 7 years learning every weakness in your armor. Michael's face went pale as he began to understand the scope of Amanda's strategic planning. Every client you've lost, every investor who's abandoned you, every business relationship that's dissolved, none of it was coincidence. It was orchestrated. While you were playing house with Jessica Miller, I was systematically destroying every foundation your professional life was built upon. You planned all of this. I planned every piece of it, Amanda confirmed with serene satisfaction. Your SEC investigation, based on documents I provided, your criminal charges, evidence I compiled over 3 years of marriage, your social exile, information I shared with carefully selected individuals, your complete professional destruction, the natural result of exposing incompetence that had been hidden by my strategic contributions. Michael stared at her in horror as the full magnitude of his miscalculation became clear. You've been planning my destruction for years. I've been preparing for every contingency since the day I realized. You viewed our marriage as a business merger rather than a partnership. Amanda's hand moved to her belly, where her daughter kicked approvingly. This child will grow up understanding that her mother doesn't just win battles, she prevents them by ensuring her enemies destroy themselves. Amanda, please. I'll do anything, sign anything, pay anything, admit to anything. Just give me one chance to start over. Amanda studied him for a long moment, observing how completely the entitled businessman had been reduced to a beggar pleading for scraps. Michael, you seem to misunderstand something fundamental about our current relationship. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I'm not your savior. I'm not your second chance. I'm not your path to redemption. Her smile was beautiful and absolutely terrifying. I'm your consequence. The silence that followed was complete, broken only by the sound of Manhattan traffic far below and Michael's increasingly labored breathing as the reality of his situation crystallized. There will be no help, no mercy, no opportunity for resurrection. You will face federal indictment, serve your sentence if convicted, and emerge as a felon with no prospects and no future. And while you're counting days in a cell, I'll be building the empire that my daughter will inherit, an empire built on the ashes of your stupidity." Michael's composure finally shattered completely. "You can't do this to me. We were married for 7 years. That has to count for something." "It does count for something," Amanda replied, standing to signal the end of their meeting. "It counts as 7 years of evidence regarding your character, your competence, and your complete unsuitability for success in any meaningful capacity." She walked to the door, her movements graceful despite her advancing pregnancy. "Security will escort you from the building. If you attempt to contact me again, my legal team will add harassment charges to your already impressive collection of federal indictments." "Amanda, wait. The baby, my rights as the father." Amanda paused in the doorway, her expression shifting to something that made Michael shrink back in his chair. "Michael, you have exactly 0 rights regarding my daughter. Genetically, legally, and morally, you are irrelevant to her existence. She will grow up knowing that her father was someone worthy of respect, not someone who confused inherited privilege with earned power." The conference room door closed behind her with finality, leaving Michael alone with the complete wreckage of his former life. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered with opportunity and possibility, none of which would ever again be available to him. Amanda returned to her office, where Rebecca was waiting with contracts representing another $100 million in strategic consulting agreements. The business world had responded to her pregnancy, not with discrimination, but with increased respect for someone powerful enough to build empires while building families. "I'm not your savior, Michael. I'm your reckoning." Chapter 8. The Birth of Power. Queens give birth to kingdoms. The private maternity suite at Mount Sinai, hospital's exclusive executive wing, resembled a luxury hotel more than a medical facility. With Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan's skyline, Amanda Johnson, now in her final weeks of pregnancy and preparing for the culmination of both her pregnancy and her complete domination of New York's business elite, conducted her morning board meetings from the hospital's state-of-the-art conference room while her obstetrician monitored her condition with military precision. "The Henderson Industries acquisition is proceeding ahead of schedule," Rebecca Martinez reported, her iPad displaying financial projections that would have been fantasy just 8 months earlier. "They've agreed to our terms completely. $75 million for strategic restructuring, with Johnson Strategic maintaining operational control for the next 5 years. Amanda nodded approvingly, her hand resting on her belly where her daughter had grown strong and active, seemingly energized by her mother's expanding empire. At 39 weeks, the pregnancy had reached the stage where Amanda's maternal power had become legendary throughout Manhattan's business community. Executives spoke in hushed tones about the woman who could negotiate hostile takeovers between contractions and close multi-million-dollar deals while preparing for motherhood. "What's our current valuation?" Amanda asked, adjusting her position in the leather chair that had been specifically designed for pregnant executives by European craftsmen who understood that power, never took maternity leave. "Johnson Strategic Consulting is now valued at $400 million. Rebecca replied with barely contained excitement. "You've achieved unprecedented growth faster than any consulting firm in corporate history. The Wall Street Journal wants to do a cover story about your rise to become Manhattan's youngest self-made female business leader." Amanda smiled with serene satisfaction, watching through the windows as Manhattan pulsed with morning energy. The city that had once belonged to men like Michael Davis now responded to her influence with the deference traditionally reserved for royalty. Her transformation from abandoned wife to business empress had become the subject of Harvard Business School case studies and Forbes cover stories. Mrs. Johnson. Dr. Sarah Williams entered the room, with the respectful demeanor of someone who understood she was treating not just a patient, but a woman whose decisions affected global markets. Your latest tests show excellent progress. The baby is developing perfectly, and you're at full term. Based on current indicators, I'd expect delivery within the next few days. Excellent. My schedule is clear for the remainder of the week. I must say, in 20 years of practicing obstetrics, I've never seen a pregnancy where the mother's success seemed to enhance rather than complicate the gestational process. Dr. Williams consulted her chart with professional admiration. Your stress levels remain remarkably low despite your ambitious professional commitments. Amanda's daughter kicked vigorously, as if approving of the medical assessment. Throughout her pregnancy, Amanda had discovered that her unborn child responded to business victories with increased activity, as if they were already partners in the family enterprise of total domination. The conference room door opened to admit Jennifer Matthews, Amanda's attorney, carrying a thick folder of documents that suggested significant legal developments. Her expression combined professional satisfaction with personal admiration for Amanda's strategic brilliance. "Amanda, I have news that will interest you greatly," Jennifer announced, settling into the chair across from the conference table. "Michael Davis received his federal indictment yesterday. 7 counts of securities fraud, 4 counts of tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit investor fraud. If convicted, he's facing 7 to 10 years in federal prison." "How comprehensive was the asset forfeiture?" Amanda inquired with clinical interest. "Complete and permanent. The Hampton house, the art collection, the yacht, even his personal jewelry. The federal judge described it as one of the most thorough financial destruction orders she'd ever issued." Jennifer's smile held the satisfaction of an attorney who had built an absolutely unassailable case. "There's more. Jessica Miller was also indicted yesterday on related fraud charges. Her role in the corporate communications manipulation was more extensive than initially realized." Amanda felt her daughter respond to this news with a particularly energetic kick, as if celebrating the complete elimination of all threats to their dynasty. "What's her likely sentence?" 3 to 5 years, plus financial penalties that will ensure she emerges from prison completely destitute. The prosecutor described her as a willing participant in systematic investor fraud, rather than an innocent victim of Michael's manipulation. Rebecca looked up from her iPad with obvious delight. "Should I prepare a press release regarding these developments?" "No press release necessary," Amanda decided after a moment's consideration. True power doesn't gloat, it simply continues building while obstacles remove themselves. The morning proceeded with characteristic efficiency as Amanda managed her expanding empire from the hospital conference room. Pharmaceutical executives sought her guidance via video conference. Technology innovators requested strategic partnerships through encrypted communications, and real estate moguls negotiated development projects through secure digital channels. At noon, Amanda's contractions began. "Dr. Williams," Amanda called calmly between meetings, "I believe it's time." The delivery proceeded with the same efficiency that characterized everything in Amanda's life. Between contractions, she approved quarterly reports, authorized international acquisitions, and finalized the establishment of the Amanda Johnson Institute for Strategic Leadership at Harvard Business School. Her daughter seemed to be timing her arrival to coincide with the completion of her mother's transformation into an unstoppable force of nature. Isabella Marie Johnson was born at 3:47 p.m. on May 23, 2025, emerging into the world with a cry that sounded distinctly imperious, as if announcing her arrival to subjects rather than medical staff. "She's perfect," Dr. Williams announced, placing the baby on Amanda's chest. 8 pounds, 2 ounces of pure determination. Amanda looked down at her daughter and felt a surge of protective love so powerful it seemed to shake the foundations of the hospital. This child would grow up in a world where her mother's name commanded respect from global leaders, where pregnant women were seen as more formidable rather than more fragile, where success was inherited through strategic brilliance rather than family connections. "Hello, Isabella," Amanda whispered, her voice soft with wonder. "Welcome to your kingdom." Within hours of Isabella's birth, news of the delivery had reached every major business publication in the world. The Wall Street Journal's headline read, "Power never takes maternity leave. Amanda Johnson gives birth to heir and $75 million. Contract on same day," Forbes announced. The Queen of Queens, Manhattan's most influential. Woman becomes mother while building empire? 3 weeks later, Amanda sat in her redesigned office suite, nursing Isabella, while simultaneously reviewing acquisition proposals that would expand her influence into biotechnology and sustainable energy. Motherhood had not slowed her professional momentum, it had accelerated it, as if having a successor to protect had unleashed reserves of ambition she hadn't known existed. "Mrs. Johnson," Rebecca announced from the doorway, "there's news about Michael Davis and Jessica Miller that you'll want to hear." Amanda looked up from Isabella, who had inherited her mother's alert intelligence and seemed to be studying the business documents scattered across the desk with precocious interest. "What developments?" "Both were convicted yesterday. Michael received the maximum sentence, 10 years federal prison, complete asset forfeiture, and permanent prohibition from serving in any executive capacity. Jessica received 4 years with no possibility of early release. Rebecca consulted her notes with professional satisfaction. Neither will ever recover professional credibility or financial stability. Amanda felt Isabella stir in her arms, the infant's dark eyes seeming to focus with unusual intensity for someone barely 3 weeks old. How appropriate. And the timing works perfectly for the Manhattan Business Summit. The summit. Rebecca's eyes lit up with understanding. "Will you be attending?" "I'll be delivering the keynote address. It's being billed as the most significant gathering of global business leaders in a decade." Amanda looked down at Isabella, whose tiny hand had grabbed onto her mother's finger with surprising strength. "This will be Isabella's first public appearance at a major business event. I want her to understand from the earliest possible age what happens when people mistake temporary advantages for permanent power. I didn't just give birth to my daughter. I gave birth to your downfall." Chapter 9. The Reckoning. Approaches, the hunter becomes the hunted. When queens reclaim their thrones, the Manhattan Business Summit. Preparation had transformed Amanda's penthouse office into a strategic command center, rivaling any military operation. Charts displaying global market data lined the walls, while secure communication systems connected her to business networks spanning 6 continents. Amanda Johnson, now 2 months postpartum and more formidable than ever, nursed Isabella Marie Johnson while simultaneously coordinating what financial journalists were already calling the most anticipated business address in a decade. The Tokyo merger confirmation just arrived. Rebecca Martinez reported from her position beside Amanda's executive chair, coordinating the international expansion that had made Johnson Strategic Consulting the most sought-after firm in 3 countries. Honda Industries has agreed to our complete restructuring package, $125 million over 3 years. Amanda shifted Isabella to her shoulder, the 2-month-old infant seeming to absorb the energy of international deal-making with remarkable composure. Motherhood had not diminished Amanda's legendary focus, it had refined it, channeling her strategic brilliance through the fierce protectiveness that had made her untouchable in Manhattan's business circles. "Excellent. Contact the London office. I want the European expansion." Protocols finalized before the summit. Amanda's voice carried the calm authority of someone who had discovered that building Empires and raising future leaders were not competing demands, but complementary expressions of feminine power. Dr. Sarah Williams had cleared Amanda for full professional activity at 8 weeks postpartum, noting that her recovery had been medically unprecedented and attributing her remarkable resilience to what she termed purpose-driven maternal energy. Isabella had thrived from birth, as if inheriting her mother's supernatural capacity for success along with her dark eyes and determined temperament. Mrs. Johnson, Rebecca continued, consulting her tablet with the efficiency of someone managing a global enterprise, the summit venue has been confirmed. 3,000 business leaders from 42 countries will be attending. Your keynote address is scheduled as the closing presentation. They want you to have the final word on the future of strategic consulting. Amanda smiled, feeling Isabella's tiny hand grasp her finger with the same determination that had characterized every Johnson family business victory. Perfect. In the media coverage, unprecedented. Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fortune, Bloomberg, Financial Times, and Economist will all have exclusive access. CNN is planning live coverage, and CNBC wants to broadcast the entire speech internationally. Rebecca's voice carried barely contained excitement. They're calling it the coronation of a queen. The irony was not lost on Amanda. 9 months earlier, she had been dismissed with 48 hours' notice by a man who had mistaken inherited privilege for earned power. Today, she commanded global attention while nursing the daughter who would inherit an empire built on intelligence, strategy, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Isabella seems particularly alert today, Amanda observed, looking down at her daughter, whose dark eyes appeared to be studying the market projections displayed across multiple screens. I think she's ready for her debut on the world stage. The summit was scheduled for August 15th at the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center, where Amanda would address an audience that included every Fortune 500 CEO, every major pharmaceutical executive, and every technology innovator who mattered in the interconnected world of global capitalism. Her speech, titled Building Empires, How Personal Crisis Becomes Professional Triumph, would chronicle her rise from abandoned wife to international business icon. I want the presentation to demonstrate something that's never been shown before, Amanda instructed, bouncing Isabella gently as the baby gurgled contentedly. A woman can simultaneously build the future and create the future. Isabella represents the next generation of leaders who will refuse to accept limitations imposed by others' expectations. Rebecca nodded, making notes on her tablet. Should I arrange for the special podium modification? Yes, I want Isabella visible throughout the address. The world needs to understand that maternal power and professional dominance are not contradictory forces, they're multiplicative ones. The weeks leading up to the summit had seen Amanda's influence expand across continents. Her biotechnology investments were revolutionizing medical research. Her sustainable energy initiatives were reshaping international environmental policy, and her strategic consulting protocols had become the global standard for corporate efficiency. Forbes had estimated her net worth at $500 million, making her one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in American history. Meanwhile, Michael Davis and Jessica Miller remained imprisoned in federal facilities, their convictions serving as cautionary tales about the consequences of underestimating strategic brilliance. Michael's 10-year sentence had been upheld on appeal, ensuring he would remain incarcerated until Isabella was old enough to understand why her mother had needed to eliminate threats to their family's security. Mrs. Johnson, Rebecca announced, I've received confirmation that the summit will be broadcast live in 43 languages. Your address will reach an estimated global audience of 50 million business professionals. Amanda felt Isabella respond to the energy of impending victory with excited movement. her tiny arms reaching toward the market displays as if already prepared to command the financial universe. 50 million witnesses to the demonstration of what authentic power looks like. The speech Amanda had crafted would serve multiple purposes, establishing her as the definitive voice of modern capitalism, introducing Isabella as the heir to a business dynasty, and providing a masterclass in strategic thinking that would influence corporate culture for decades. But more importantly, it would represent the complete transformation of a woman who had refused to accept dismissal quietly. "I want you to understand something. Isabella," Amanda whispered to her daughter as evening light cast golden rays across their Manhattan domain. "Your mother didn't just survive betrayal, she transformed it into triumph. You're being born into a world where women like us don't just participate in power structures, we create them." Isabella cooed softly, her dark eyes seeming to sparkle with inherited ambition and the genetic predisposition for strategic dominance that would define the next generation of business leadership. The countdown to Amanda's triumph had begun. In 72 hours, she would stand before the world's most powerful executives, holding the daughter who represented the future, delivering the address that would cement her legacy as the woman who had redefined success itself. Tomorrow, the world will witness the coronation of a queen and the funeral of fools. Chapter 10. The Final Victory. Some women survive their storms. I became the storm. The Jacob K. Javits Convention Center had been transformed into a cathedral of capitalism, with 3,000 of the world's most powerful executives gathered beneath soaring glass ceilings that reflected the August morning sun like scattered diamonds. Amanda Johnson stood at the podium center, 11-week-old Isabella Marie Johnson, sleeping peacefully in a custom carrier designed to showcase both mother and daughter to the global audience, both dressed in coordinating ivory silk that seemed to glow under the stage lights. At 37, Amanda had achieved something unprecedented in modern business history. She commanded global markets while nursing an infant, managed international acquisitions while raising the next generation of female leadership, and had redefined power itself to include the fierce protectiveness of motherhood. The audience before her represented every Fortune 500 company, every major financial institution, and every government economic advisor who mattered in the interconnected world of international commerce. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amanda began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the vast convention hall. "9 months ago, I discovered that the man I had trusted with my heart, my business insights and my future had chosen betrayal over loyalty. I was pregnant, publicly humiliated, and given 48 hours to disappear quietly from the life I had helped build." Isabella stirred slightly against her mother's chest, as if responding to her voice with the instinctive recognition that she was witnessing something historic. Amanda adjusted the carrier with practiced grace, demonstrating that maternal care and professional dominance were not competing forces, but complementary expressions of feminine power. Traditional wisdom suggested I should retreat, heal privately, and slowly rebuild my confidence. Instead, I chose to prove that pregnant women don't withdraw from battle. We bring reinforcements. Amanda's smile was radiant as she looked down at Isabella, whose dark eyes seemed unusually alert for an 11-week-old infant. "This is Isabella Marie Johnson, my daughter, and the next generation of leaders who will refuse to accept limitations imposed by others' expectations." The applause was immediate and thunderous. 3,000 business leaders, rising to their feet in acknowledgement of something they had never seen before, a woman who had transformed personal devastation into professional triumph while literally creating new life. The ovation continued for nearly 3 full minutes, with camera flashes capturing images that would grace the covers of every major business publication worldwide. Amanda walked across the stage with fluid confidence, Isabella secure in her carrier, while Amanda gestured toward presentation screens, displaying her company's meteoric growth. Johnson Strategic Consulting has secured over $500 million in international contracts this year. We've revolutionized corporate efficiency protocols on 3 continents, established the largest female leadership institute in academic history, and proven that pregnancy enhances rather than limits professional capacity. The audience leaned forward collectively, captivated by Amanda's magnetic presence and the revolutionary message she embodied. CEOs who controlled trillion-dollar markets were taking notes like business school students, recognizing they were witnessing the emergence of a new paradigm in corporate leadership. But true success isn't measured solely in financial terms, Amanda said, her tone becoming more intimate despite the vast audience. It's measured in the legacy we create for future generations. Isabella will grow up in a world where her mother's name opens doors that were once locked by traditional assumptions about women's roles and capabilities. Through the convention center's massive windows, the Manhattan skyline stretched toward the horizon, a city that now responded to Amanda's influence rather than the inherited mediocrity of men like Michael Davis, who sat in a federal prison cell, watching this triumph on a television monitor while finally understanding the magnitude of his miscalculation. I'm often asked about the secret to overcoming professional adversity, Amanda continued, her voice carrying the authority that had convinced Fortune 500 boards to restructure entire corporations. The answer is simple. Never confuse temporary setbacks with permanent defeats. The most devastating mistakes in business occur when people underestimate their opponent's capacity for strategic thinking. Isabella cooed softly, her tiny hand visible against her mother's silk blouse, the gesture captured by dozens of photographers and creating an image that would become iconic in business leadership circles. Today, I'm announcing that the Amanda Johnson Institute will be expanding to include campuses at Stanford, MIT, and Oxford University, with a combined endowment of $60 million dedicated to training the next generation of female business leaders. Amanda's voice resonated with conviction that seemed to shake the convention. Center's foundations. These institutions will teach what I've learned, that our greatest defeats can become our most powerful victories if we have the courage to transform pain into purpose, betrayal into motivation, and temporary setbacks into permanent advantages. The standing ovation was unlike anything the convention center had ever witnessed. 3,000 of the world's most powerful people, acknowledging the rise of a new empress who had redefined success itself. Amanda stood at the podium center, Isabella in her arms, accepting tribute from the business world with the composure of someone who had always known this moment was inevitable. In closing, I want to share something personal with you, Amanda said as the applause gradually subsided. 9 months ago, someone gave me 48 hours to disappear from their life. They believed the timeline was sufficient to erase my influence, diminish my worth, and reduce me to irrelevance. Her smile contained depths of satisfaction that could power Manhattan for a year. I used those 48 hours not to disappear, but to begin building something unforgettable. Isabella opened her eyes fully at that moment, her dark gaze seeming to survey the audience with precocious intelligence, as if already prepared to inherit the empire her mother had forged from betrayal and brilliance. The future belongs to builders, not inheritors. It belongs to strategists, not lucky recipients of privilege. And it belongs to women who understand that true power comes not from what we're given, but from what we refuse to accept. Amanda's final words carried the weight of absolute truth. Some women survive their storms. I became the storm. The final ovation transcended anything in the convention center's history. 3,000 global leaders acknowledging not just Amanda's triumph, but the emergence of a new era where success was defined by intelligence, determination, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Amanda remained at the podium, Isabella sleeping peacefully against her shoulder as delegates filed toward the exits, carrying the message that would reshape international business culture. The woman who had been given 48 hours to disappear had instead spent 9 months becoming unforgettable, building an empire that would influence global markets for decades while raising the daughter who would carry that legacy into the future. As the crowd dispersed and the cameras stopped rolling, Amanda looked down at Isabella, whose tiny fingers were wrapped around her mother's pearl necklace with determined strength. "Welcome to your inheritance, my darling," Amanda whispered. "A world where women like us don't just participate in power, we define it. They gave me 48 hours to disappear. I used them to become unforgettable." The end.